They told you to be calm, told you to suppress your anger, to swallow your rage, to smile when you wanted to destroy, to be quiet when every fiber of your being screamed for justice. They taught you that good men don't feel fury, that's strong. Men don't burn with indignation. That wise men float above the battlefield like ghosts untouched by the blood and chaos below. They lied to you. They wanted you controllable, predictable, manageable. They wanted you to be a storm that announced its arrival, that followed their weather patterns, that dissipated on command. But you were never meant to be their kind of storm. Ancient philosophers understood something that modern weakness has forgotten. They knew that rage is not the enemy of wisdom, but its raw material. They knew that fury is not the opposite of control, but the foundation upon which true control is built. Marcus Aurelius did not rule the Roman Empire by suppressing his anger at incompetent senators and treacherous generals. He ruled by transforming that anger into something far more dangerous: cold, calculated, unstoppable presence. This is the awakening, not the death of your storm, but its evolution. Not the suppression of your fire, but its refinement into something that burns without consuming itself, destroys without destroying the wielder, conquers without announcing the conquest. You have been broken. Life has taken its hammer to the crude metal of your original self and beaten you into shapes you never chose. Betrayal has cut you deeper than any blade. Humiliation has stripped you naked before enemies who delighted in your exposure. Love has used your heart as target practice, and every arrow found its mark. The world has taught you lessons you never wanted to learn, forced you to endure what you thought would destroy you, pushed you beyond limits you didn't know existed. Good. Every strike of that hammer was making you stronger. Every cut was carving away weakness. Every betrayal was teaching you self-reliance. Every humiliation was burning away the parts of you that needed others' approval to exist. Every heartbreak was clearing space for something harder, colder, more resilient to grow in its place. The weak man emerges from such trials bitter and broken, raging at the world for its cruelty, demanding justice from a universe that operates by different laws than human fairness. He becomes predictable in his pain, controllable through his need for validation, manageable through his desperate desire to make others understand his suffering. He turns his wounds into weapons against himself, his scars into chains that bind him to the past, his memories into prisons that prevent him from becoming who he was meant to be. But the storm that cannot be controlled emerges differently. He rises from the ashes, not with explanation but with presence, carries his scars not as badges of victimhood, but as credentials of survival. He transforms his pain not into bitterness, but into a kind of terrible clarity that sees through every deception, every manipulation, every false promise the world offers. This man has learned the most dangerous lesson of all. He needs nothing from anyone. Not their approval, not their understanding, not their love, not their fear, not their respect. He has discovered the ultimate freedom that comes from complete self-possession, the unassailable strength that flows from requiring nothing external for his sense of worth or purpose or identity. Watch how differently he moves through the world. There is no hurry in his steps because he is not running toward anything or away from anything. There is no tension in his shoulders because he carries no weight that belongs to others. There is no pleading in his voice because he makes no requests that his survival depends upon. There is no fear in his eyes because he has already faced the worst and found himself still standing. This is not numbness. This is not emotional death. This is transmutation, the alchemical process by which base metals become gold, by which human suffering becomes superhuman strength. The storm that cannot be controlled has learned to harness the very forces that once threatened to destroy him. His anger becomes fuel for focus. His pain becomes the foundation of unshakable resolve. His betrayals become lessons in human nature that no university could teach. Epictetus understood this transformation better than most. Born a slave, crippled in body, he had every reason to rage against the injustice of his circumstances. Instead, he discovered that his chains could only bind his body, never his mind. His disability could limit his movement, never his thinking. His lowly status could affect how others saw him, never how he saw himself. From the depths of powerlessness, he forged a philosophy of ultimate empowerment, The recognition that while we cannot control what happens to us, we can absolutely control our response to what happens to us. This is where the storm begins to form, not in the external circumstances that buffet and batter us, but in the internal response that either breaks under pressure or crystallizes into something harder than diamond. The uncontrollable storm discovers that his true power was never in changing his circumstances, but in changing his relationship to his circumstances. He stops trying to make the world fair and starts making himself unstoppable. The weak seek to control others because they cannot control themselves. They demand that the world conform to their expectations because they lack the strength to adapt to what the world actually is. They exhaust themselves fighting battles they cannot win because they refuse to fight the one battle they can win. The battle for mastery over their own reactions, their own emotions, their own choices. But the man who becomes the storm they cannot control fights a different war entirely. He wages campaign after campaign on the battlefield of his own consciousness. Every trigger becomes a target to eliminate. Every weakness becomes a fortress to fortify. Every vulnerability becomes a strength to develop. He does not ask the world to be gentler, he makes himself more resilient. He does not demand that others be more honest. He develops the ability to see through every lie. He does not expect justice from a system designed to benefit others. He creates his own justice through the absolute integrity of his choices. This internal warfare produces an external presence that others find deeply unsettling. There is something in his stillness that speaks of depths they cannot measure. Something in his silence that contains more power than their loudest screams. Something in his calm that hints at storms they have never weathered. They sense, without understanding why, that this man operates by different rules, that he has access to resources they cannot see, that he possesses a kind of strength they cannot comprehend or compete with or control. The storm that cannot be controlled does not announce itself with thunder and lightning. It moves like winter across the landscape, inevitable and implacable, changing everything it touches without violence, without noise, without drama. Its power is not in destruction, but in transformation, not in chaos, but in the kind of order that reorganizes reality around its presence. Seneca knew this power intimately. As advisor to Nero, he watched the young emperor's tantrums reshape the Roman world through pure emotional volatility. But Seneca himself wielded a different kind of influence. The quiet authority of a man who needed nothing from the situation except the opportunity to exercise his principles. When Nero finally turned against him, Seneca faced death with the same calm he had brought to life, demonstrating that the ultimate power is not in avoiding consequences, but in choosing how to meet them. This is the awakening the modern world fears most. The man who cannot be bought, bribed, threatened, or seduced. The man who has already lost everything he was afraid to lose and discovered he could survive without it. The man who has been betrayed by everyone he trusted and learned to trust himself completely. The man who has been reduced to nothing and rebuilt himself from the ground up according to his own specifications. Such a man becomes dangerous not because he seeks to harm others, because he cannot be controlled by the systems that depend on controllable people. He does not need the job, so he cannot be threatened with firing. He does not need the approval, so he cannot be manipulated through social pressure. He does not need the relationship, so he cannot be leveraged through emotional blackmail. Does not need the security, so he cannot be paralyzed by fear of loss. This freedom terrifies those who profit from others' dependencies. The storm that cannot be controlled represents their worst nightmare, proof that their power over others is an illusion that dissolves the moment someone refuses to participate in the charade. His very existence is a declaration that the emperor has no clothes, that the systems of control are only as strong as people's willingness to submit to them. But this man does not become ungovernable through rebellion or defiance or dramatic gestures of independence. He becomes ungovernable through the quiet cultivation of self-sufficiency, through the patient development of internal resources that no external force can touch or corrupt or steal. He builds his fortress not in the world, but in his own character. Creates his wealth not in possessions, but in capabilities. establishes his power not through domination, but through the absolute sovereignty of his own mind. The process of this transformation is neither quick nor easy. It requires the deliberate destruction of everything you thought you were in order to discover what you actually are. It demands the systematic elimination of every external support system until you learn to stand on the strength of your own spine. It insists on the careful examination of every belief, every assumption, every hope, every fear until you can distinguish between what is truly yours and what was installed by others for their benefit. This excavation of the authentic self is like mining for diamonds in the depths of the earth. You must dig through layers of conditioning, past sediments of other people's expectations, beyond the fossils of childhood programming, into the bedrock of your essential nature. Find there is not what you expected. It is not the soft, malleable, people-pleasing creature you were trained to be. It is something harder, colder, more elemental. It is the part of you that existed before society began its shaping. The part that will remain after all external structures crumble. The part that no force on earth can alter or destroy. This discovery changes everything. Once you have made contact with this unalterable core, you begin to operate from a completely different foundation. Your decisions no longer flow from fear of what others might think or do. Actions no longer seek to maintain relationships that drain your energy or fulfill expectations that diminish your power. Your words no longer attempt to convince or explain or justify your existence to people who were never qualified to judge it. Instead, you begin to move through the world like a force of nature. Not destructive, but inexorable. It's not violent, but utterly committed to your own path. It's not cruel, but completely indifferent to opinions that do not serve your purpose. You become like the mountain that does not explain its height, like the ocean that does not justify its depth, like the winter that does not apologize for its cold. This transformation manifests first as a change in presence. Others notice immediately that something is different, though they cannot name what has changed. There is a new quality to your stillness, a different weight to your silence, an unfamiliar intensity to your calm. You have not become more aggressive, but you have become more concentrated. You have not become hostile, but you have become harder. You have not become cruel, but you have become completely honest about what you will and will not accept. The weak mistake this new presence for arrogance or coldness or superiority. They interpret your lack of reactivity as dismissal, your self-containment as rejection, your independence as abandonment. But they are wrong on all counts. You have not become less caring. You have learned to care more precisely. You have not become less loving. You have learned to love more wisely. You have not become less human. You have learned to be human without apologizing for it. This precision in caring, this wisdom in loving, this unapologetic humanity creates a kind of magnetic field around you. Some people are drawn to the strength they sense but cannot understand. Others are repelled by the challenge your presence represents to their comfortable weaknesses. Both reactions tell you everything you need to know about who deserves your energy and who does not. The storm that cannot be controlled
learns to be highly selective about where it releases its power.
Not everyone deserves access to your intensity. Not every situation requires your full engagement. Not every problem needs your solution. Not every fight is worth your participation. You develop the warrior's wisdom of choosing your battles, based not on emotion but on strategy. It's not on impulse but on purpose. It's not on what others expect, but on what your highest self demands. This selectivity is often misunderstood as withdrawal or disengagement. But it is actually the opposite. It is the concentration of your energy into channels that actually matter. Instead of scattering your power across 100 meaningless conflicts, you focus it like a laser on the few battles that will actually determine the shape of your life. Instead of reacting to every provocation, you respond only to those that serve your larger purposes. The result is a man who seems to accomplish impossible things with minimal effort, who appears to win without fighting, who achieves his goals while others are still arguing about whether those goals are achievable. This is not luck or natural talent or favorable circumstances. This is the compound effect of concentrated power applied consistently over time, to carefully chosen objectives. Marcus
Yes.
Aurelius exemplified this principle throughout his reign.
Yes.
Faced with constant threats from barbarian invasions, internal rebellions, natural disasters, and political intrigue, he did not scatter his attention across every crisis simultaneously. Instead, he developed the ability to focus completely on whatever required his immediate attention while maintaining awareness of the larger patterns that connected all events. This allowed him to make decisions that solved multiple problems simultaneously, to take actions that strengthened his position while weakening his enemies, to remain calm in chaos because he could see the order underlying apparent confusion. This kind of strategic thinking becomes natural when you stop being reactive and start being responsive. The reactive man is always being pulled off course by external events, always being triggered into emotional states that cloud his judgment, always being manipulated by others who understand his patterns better than he does. But the responsive man operates from a center of gravity that cannot be moved, makes decisions from a place of clarity that cannot be clouded, acts from a position of strength that cannot be undermined. The difference between reaction and response is the difference between being a leaf blown by the wind and being the mountain that shapes the wind's path. The reactive person is always at the mercy of circumstances, always vulnerable to manipulation, always dancing to music composed by others. But the responsive person has developed the ability to pause between stimulus and action, to choose their response based on their values rather than their impulses, to remain sovereign over their own behavior. Regardless of external pressure, this sovereignty over self becomes sovereignty over circumstances. Not because you can control what happens, but because you can control what happens next. Not because you can prevent problems, but because you can determine how problems affect you. Not because you can avoid pain, but because you can choose what that pain teaches you and how it changes you. The storm that cannot be controlled has learned that true power is not in dominating others, but in being undominated by anything. This includes emotions, circumstances, other people's opinions, social pressures, economic fears, relationship dependencies, and all the other forces that keep most people trapped in patterns of weakness and reactivity. This freedom from domination creates a presence that others find both attractive and threatening. Attractive because everyone secretly yearns for the kind of strength and independence you embody. It's threatening because your example exposes their own captivity to forces you have learned to master. Some will be inspired to begin their own journey toward freedom. Others will try to drag you back into the cage of conventional weakness. Your ability to distinguish between these two groups and respond appropriately will determine how much of your energy you waste on people who cannot or will not use it constructively. The awakened storm does not try to save everyone. He recognizes that each person must choose their own relationship with strength and weakness, freedom and captivity, power and powerlessness. He offers his example, not his rescue. He provides inspiration, not intervention. He demonstrates what is possible, but he does not carry anyone across the threshold they must cross alone. This can be a lonely path, especially in the beginning. When you are shedding old relationships that were based on your former weakness and have not yet attracted new ones based on your emerging strength. But this loneliness is not emptiness, it is spaciousness. It is the freedom to discover who you actually are when you are not performing roles designed to please others. When you are not managing emotions to maintain relationships. When you are not compromising your truth to avoid conflict. In this space of authentic solitude, something remarkable happens. You begin to enjoy your own company in a way you never thought possible. You discover that the person you have been running from through constant activity and endless relationships is actually the person you have been searching for your entire life. You find that the voice you have been trying to silence through noise and distraction is actually the voice of your deepest wisdom. You'll realize that the strength you have been seeking in others has been developing within you all along, waiting for you to stop looking outside yourself and claim what was always yours. This self-discovery is not narcissism or self-obsession. It is the prerequisite for genuine relationship with others. Only when you know yourself completely can you offer yourself authentically. Only when you need nothing from others can you give freely to them. Only when you are complete in yourself can you enhance rather than drain the lives of those around you. The storm that cannot be controlled becomes a gift to others, but only to those who are ready to receive it. His presence calls forth the strength in others without demanding it. His example inspires growth without forcing it. His energy elevates conversations without dominating them. He becomes a catalyst for others' awakening, not through preaching or teaching, but simply through being fully himself. This is how real influence works, not through manipulation or coercion or charismatic persuasion, but through the magnetic pull of authentic power. People are drawn to strength the way plants turn toward the sun, not because they are forced to, but because something in them recognizes what it needs for growth. The man who has mastered himself becomes a kind of beacon for others who are still struggling in darkness. A proof that the journey they are contemplating is not only possible, but transformational. But this influence is never imposed. The awakened storm does not need converts or followers or disciples. He needs nothing from others' recognition of his power. He operates from fullness, not emptiness. From abundance, not scarcity. From strength, not weakness. This allows him to be genuinely helpful when help is requested and genuinely detached when it is rejected. This detachment is perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of the Stoic awakening. It is not indifference or callousness or emotional numbness. It is the freedom that comes from caring deeply about things that matter, while remaining unattached to outcomes you cannot control. It is the ability to give everything to a worthy cause while accepting that the results may not match your hopes. It is the wisdom to love fully while holding lightly, to commit completely while preparing for change. This paradox of engaged detachment allows the storm to move through life with tremendous intensity while maintaining perfect flexibility. He can pour himself into projects and relationships and causes without being destroyed when they end or change or disappoint. He can fight battles with everything he has while remaining unbroken by defeat. He can love deeply while surviving loss. He can hope strongly while accepting disappointment. This resilience is not built through avoidance of pain, but through repeated exposure to it under controlled conditions. Like a blacksmith who builds tolerance to heat through gradual exposure to higher and higher temperatures, the man who would become uncontrollable must systematically expose himself to the forces that once controlled him. Each exposure that doesn't destroy him makes him stronger. Each challenge that doesn't break him makes him more flexible. Each loss that doesn't crush him makes him more resilient. This process of deliberate hardening is not about becoming insensitive, but about becoming antifragile, gaining strength from stressors rather than being weakened by them. The awakened storm learns to see obstacles as training equipment, setbacks as intelligence gathering, enemies as teachers, failures as data. Everything that happens becomes fuel for the fire of his development, rather than evidence of his inadequacy or the world's hostility. This reframing of experience transforms everything. What once seemed like cosmic injustice becomes curriculum in the University of Strength. What once felt like personal attack becomes impersonal instruction in the art of resilience.
A what?
Once appeared to be evidence of your unworthiness becomes proof of your capacity to endure and overcome and grow stronger through adversity. The storm that cannot be controlled has learned to extract value from every experience, to find lessons in every loss, to discover opportunities in every obstacle. This does not mean he enjoys suffering or seeks out difficulty. It means he has developed the ability to transform whatever happens into material for his own strengthening. He becomes like the oyster that turns irritation into pearls, like the coal that becomes diamond under pressure, like the metal that emerges stronger from the forge. This transformation is visible to others in the quality of his presence. There is something unshakable in his foundation, something untouchable in his core, something unconquerable in his spirit. People sense that this man has been tested by forces they have never faced and has emerged not just intact, but enhanced. They recognize in him something they aspire to but do not yet possess the ability to remain himself regardless of external circumstances. This recognition often produces two responses. Some people are inspired to begin their own journey of strengthening, seeing in his example proof that transformation is possible. Others are threatened by what his presence implies about their own choices, and they may try to undermine or attack, or dismiss what they cannot understand or achieve. The awakened storm learns to accept both responses with equal calm. Understanding that each person must choose their own relationship with strength and weakness, he does not waste energy trying to convince the unconvincible or rescue the unrescuable. He simply continues on his path, available to those who genuinely seek what he has found, but untroubled by those who prefer their familiar prisons to unfamiliar freedom. This selective engagement allows him to pour his energy into relationships and projects that multiply his impact rather than drain his resources. The mathematics of this approach are remarkable. Instead of scattering his power across 100 shallow connections, he develops a few deep alliances with people who share his commitment to growth and excellence. Instead of trying to be everything to everyone, he becomes invaluable to those who can appreciate what he offers, instead of seeking universal approval. He earns profound respect from those whose opinions actually matter. This concentration of energy and attention produces results that seem almost magical too. Those who are still operating from the scattered reactive patterns of conventional weakness, the man who has learned to focus like a laser accomplishes in months what others struggle with for years. The man who has learned to choose his battles wins wars, while others are still fighting skirmishes. The man who has learned to be selective with his energy creates value while others are still consuming it. This is not about becoming selfish or isolated or superior. This is about becoming strategic in the deployment of your most precious resources: your time, your attention, your energy, your care. The storm that cannot be controlled has learned that these resources are finite and must be invested wisely. If they are to produce maximum impact, he has learned to say no to the good so he can say yes to the great, to refuse the urgent so he can attend to the important, to avoid the many so he can serve the few who matter most. This selectivity extends to every area of his life. He chooses his battles based on their strategic value, not their emotional appeal. He selects his relationships based on mutual growth potential, not social convenience. He invests his time in activities that compound his capabilities, not those that merely fill his schedule. He focuses his attention on problems he can actually solve, not those that merely demand his concern. This disciplined approach to life creates a kind of compound effect where each choice builds upon previous choices, to create momentum that becomes almost unstoppable. The man who consistently chooses strength over comfort, growth over security, truth over popularity, purpose over pleasure begins to develop a gravitational field that attracts opportunities and resources and allies that were never available to his weaker former self. This is how the storm that cannot be controlled begins to reshape the world around him. Without violence or coercion or manipulation, his presence becomes a standard that elevates everything it touches. His example becomes a challenge that calls forth the best in others. His energy becomes a catalyst that accelerates positive change in every system he enters. But this influence is never forced or demanded or expected. It flows naturally from the quality of his being, the integrity of his choices, the consistency of his character. He becomes like the sun, which gives light not because it must, but because it cannot help but be what it is. His power radiates from his core without effort or intention, warming those who come near and providing illumination for those who seek direction. The journey to this state of being is not easy, but it is simple. It requires the systematic elimination of everything that makes you controllable and the systematic development of everything that makes you sovereign. It demands the patient cultivation of internal resources that no external force can touch or corrupt or steal. It insists on the daily practice of choosing response over reaction, wisdom over emotion, purpose over pleasure, growth over comfort. Most men never attempt this journey because they mistake difficulty for impossibility. They see the distance between where they are and where they could be and assume the gap is too wide to cross. They look at the challenges involved in transformation and decide they lack the strength to overcome them. They consider the sacrifices required for genuine freedom and conclude the price is too high to pay. But the storm that cannot be controlled knows better. He knows that every journey begins with a single step, that every strength begins with a single choice, that every transformation begins with a single decision to stop accepting what is and start creating what could be. He knows that the distance between weakness and strength is not measured in miles, but in choices. It's not in time, but in commitment. It's not in natural gifts, but in deliberate practice. The awakening is not a destination, but a direction. It is not a place. You arrive at but a path you walk. It is not a state you achieve once and maintain forever, but a quality you cultivate daily, through thousands of small decisions that either strengthen or weaken your sovereignty over yourself. Each choice to face truth rather than avoid it, to embrace difficulty rather than seek comfort, to grow rather than remain static, to lead rather than follow, moves you further along the path toward becoming uncontrollable. This path transforms not just your external circumstances, but your internal experience of being human. You begin to understand what the ancients meant when they spoke of the divine spark within mortal flesh, the eternal element that no earthly force can diminish or destroy. You discover that you are not just a biological machine, responding to environmental stimuli, but a conscious being capable of transcending your conditioning and choosing your response to whatever life presents. This discovery changes everything, because it means you are never truly powerless, never completely at the mercy of circumstances, never entirely dependent on external forces for your sense of worth or purpose or identity. You always retain the ultimate freedom, the freedom to choose what your experiences mean, how they affect you, what you learn from them, and who you become because of them. The storm that cannot be controlled has learned to exercise this ultimate freedom with the skill of a master craftsman. He shapes his character the way a sculptor shapes marble, removing everything that does not serve his highest vision of himself. He develops his capabilities the way a musician develops technique, through patient practice and constant refinement. He builds his strength the way an architect builds a cathedral, stone by stone, with attention to both foundation and beauty. This process never ends, because there is no limit to how strong, wise, capable, or free a human being can become. There are always new levels of mastery to achieve, new challenges to overcome, new aspects of self to develop. The journey of awakening is not about reaching a final destination, but about becoming someone who is always growing, always learning, always pushing beyond previous limitations. This endless growth creates a kind of dangerous vitality that others find both magnetic and intimidating. There is something alive in the awakened storm that most people have lost or never developed. Something dynamic and creative and unstoppable. He moves through the world like electricity through a conductor, illuminating everything he touches, energizing every system he enters, creating change through his very presence. This vitality is not manic energy or restless activity or desperate motion. It is the quiet power of a man who has found his purpose and committed himself completely to its fulfillment. It is the focused intensity of someone who knows exactly what he wants and exactly what he must do to get it. It is the unstoppable momentum of a force that has aligned itself with the deepest patterns of reality and learned to work with them rather than against them. The storm that cannot be controlled has discovered that true power comes not from fighting the current, but from understanding it so completely that you can use it to reach any destination you choose. He has learned to read the invisible forces that shape events, to anticipate the consequences of actions before they are taken, to position himself where the waves of change will carry him toward his objectives rather than away from them. This strategic understanding of how the world actually works gives him an enormous advantage over those who are still operating from wishful thinking and emotional reaction. While others are surprised by predictable outcomes, he is already prepared for multiple scenarios, While others are paralyzed by uncertainty, he has developed the ability to act decisively with incomplete information. While others are overwhelmed by complexity, he has learned to see the simple patterns that underlie apparent chaos. This clarity allows him to move through the world with the confidence of a man who understands the rules of the game better than most players. He does not need to rely on luck or hope or other people's charity because he has developed the skills necessary to create his own opportunities. He does not need to fear change because he has learned to adapt more quickly than circumstances can shift. He does not need to avoid conflict because he has developed the strength to handle whatever confrontations may arise. The result is a man who appears to live under different laws than everyone else, who seems to achieve impossible results through simple means, who appears to win without fighting and to lead without commanding. But there is no magic in his success, no special advantages, no unfair benefits. There is only the compound effect of thousands of choices made from strength rather than weakness, from wisdom rather than ignorance, from purpose rather than drift. This is the promise of the Stoic awakening, that any man can begin today to make the choices that will transform him into the storm that cannot be controlled. The materials are already within you. The power is already present. The capacity for transformation is already built into your nature. All that remains is the decision to stop accepting controllability and start developing sovereignty. To stop reacting to life and start responding to it. To stop being shaped by circumstances and start shaping yourself. The world needs such men now more than ever. In an age of mass manipulation and manufactured consent, of artificial scarcity and engineered dependence, of designed addiction and systematic weakening, the man who cannot be controlled becomes a force of nature that disrupts every system built to exploit human weakness. His very existence proves that the chains are optional, that the limitations are chosen, that the powerlessness is learned and can therefore be unlearned. He does not need to declare war on the systems that profit from weakness. He simply stops participating in them, does not need to lead a revolution against the forces of control, simply becomes uncontrollable. He does not need to fight the storm. He becomes the storm that all other storms must reckon with, the force that cannot be predicted or managed or contained or directed by any power outside itself. This is your birthright as a conscious being. This is your potential as a man. This is your destiny if you choose to claim it. The question is not whether you have what it takes to become uncontrollable. The question is whether you have the courage to stop being controlled. The storm is waiting within you. The only question is when you will set it free.